Okay, welcome back to video number 5 in the bouncing ball series, and we're going to finish up the animation with this ball today. A few things I wanted to talk about that I hadn't covered yet. There are some tools under the animation tab that could help you better visualize the way your ball is bouncing. As I move along here, there isn't much to see in the scene to help us have a frame of reference. And also down here, if I select the ball, you can see that my graph editor down here has a few things. Here's my y-axis, and we can see how my ball is bouncing. But sometimes it's difficult to be able to visually translate that into what is happening here in the viewport. These tools up here allow me to do that. This first handle here is the motion trail handle, and you can see that it pops up into my outliner, and that in here in my viewport you can see how my ball bounces along this visual graph now. And with that you can see the steepness or the curves that are in my animation, and I can grab these and make some adjustments just as if they were an object that I had created. So if I hit the W key, I can grab it and I can move these different lines around and make them a little bit sharper on the uptake and a little bit smoother as they fall back down to the ground. Get rid of some of the odd stuff that's happening. And if I wanted it to hit the ground a little bit better, my surface, see how this looks. And then it just slowly comes to a stop. Okay, now if I hit play, see the ball bounces. I've made the curves a little bit sharper and smooth some things out. Now the way to get rid of this handle is to select it here in the outliner and then hit the delete key to delete it. Don't worry, your animation is still there. It's just deleting that object. Also, there is a ghosting method, which is this little button right up here, and if I move my ball along, I actually have to select it first, hit the ghosting button, and now you can see that here there are some ghosting of my ball in front of and behind it, so I can see where the ball is going to and where it has been. That can kind of give you a feel for how your animation is working as it goes through the timeline. The way to get rid of that is just to turn it off here. This is a play blast button, which if you want to make a really quick little video of it, you would hit it and it does that, and then it comes up with this kind of lower quality video, but you can kind of get a feel for how the video is going to look. And that's also something that you could use and save, and then be able to quickly move around on files to give other people an idea of what the animation and how the animation is working. Okay, so now that we've done all that, maybe it's time to actually export this so that we can now put it into an animation for using Premiere Pro. So now I've got my ball selected, and this is my perspective view. This is the only camera we have that we're going to use right now for the scene. So I'm going to set my scene up by moving the ball around. I'm going to kind of put it here at the edge, sort of like it has just been dropped from outside of scene. And I'm going to set everything up so I can kind of get a feel for it. And then it's just going to move across the scene there. The next thing I need to do is I need to go to Arnold, and I need to give myself a light source. If I don't have a light source, I won't be able to see anything happen. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the horizon light. You can see it turns everything black in the background, but once it renders, there'll be some light added to the scene, as well as a little bit of a kind of a skyline. And if I wanted to see that temporarily, I could just hit the play button here, and there's what my ball will look like when it comes into the scene. And it starts to render a little bit down here. You see my ball over here. And if I were running this right now, the Play Blaster, or not Play Blaster, but Arnold would try to keep up with me and make it so that I could see the ball rendering. We're not going to do that. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is we're going to go to Render Settings, and we're going to open up this window. And you can see here from this window that because I've already been working with Arnold, I have Arnold here, Arnold Render, as the rendering that I'm using. My software and hardware and some other things are here as well, and if you had some other source of rendering that you're going to use, it might show up in this window as well. So let's go over our settings. You can see that this is the path where our bouncing ball will save when we make these images. We have a bouncing ball. We're going to start at number 1 and we're going to go all the way through to 200, and this is the size that I'm currently using. We want to use the image format of a PNG, so I'm going to use PNG for this. There are other choices. If you wanted to give this a different name, you could do that here, and then instead of giving it the default name, bouncing ball underscore number 1, and then whatever picture number it was, it would have a different name, name that you gave it here. We're going to leave this alone. We're going to leave this alone. One thing we do need to make sure is that our frame animation extension is correct. By default, it usually shows up here at name.extension or just name. But what we want to do is we want to make sure we have name, number sign, and then dot extension. So name, hashtag, dot extension. If we have the hashtag at the end, what's going to happen is it'll have numbers at the end, and the software that you're using may not recognize what type of file this is, and it wouldn't work. So we want to make sure that we leave it here at name, hashtag, dot extension. We're going to start at frame number 1, as I have here, and we're going to end at frame number 200. We're going to go frame by frame. We're going to use our perspective camera. This is where you could choose whatever camera you wanted to use. As you can see, we have front, side, and top, which are our other default cameras that we see over here in our outliner. I want to make sure that I'm using my perspective camera. The image size, I'm going to pick 1080 for this one. You can see that you have all these other choices, but I'm just going to go ahead and go with the 1080. And you can pick a different size, especially if your computer struggles trying to render this. You may want to go a little faster with a different size screen. So there's 1080. You can see that's a width of 1920 by 1080. I'm going to leave the rest of this alone. Just a quick note, there is an Arnold tab here, and this is where we could adjust the quality to improve the quality of our video. So each one of these images would be improved quality, but this is a simple animation with some simple objects. We're not going to get into all that this time around. Okay, so once we have all that set up, now we're going to go back, and here under Render, normally we would go to Batch Render and use the Batch Render to set this up. But we're not going to be able to do that because Arnold is an additional licensed software. So if you wanted to use Arnold as your renderer for a video, so doing multiple images like this, you would need to have an additional license. So instead what we're going to use is the render sequence. Render sequence is right here, and we're going to use the option box. And when we open it up, you can see that up here at the top it says render sequence, frames 1 through 200. Those are the ones that we've chosen to do our animation for. We're going to use our perspective camera. If it says anything other than that here, select your perspective camera. And if you wanted to, you could save it in a different file location, but we're going to just use the default this time. So now when I press the render sequence and close button, it'll start to render, and you can see that here it starts to render in this screen. And what it is it's making 200 individual PNG pictures that we will use later in Premiere Pro to make a video. So I'm going to pause now and let it go ahead and render out our video, and once it's done, I'm going to go ahead, I'll start back up, and we'll walk through the process of finishing this up and then opening it in Premiere Pro. Okay, so one more thing I wanted to show you real quick while we were rendering was that if you went to your project folder and found your images and went into that folder, you would see that it's beginning to populate all of these different videos or images that we want for our video, and they're numbering them. So here's the bouncing ball number 1, and then frame number 21, 22, 23. All of these pictures correspond to frame numbers in your animation. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to pause and wait for this to finish. Okay, welcome back after this long rendering process, and at the end of this you should have 200 pictures, starting at 1 all the way down to 200. And if we were to double click on one of these and bring it up in our images, you can see that we have a rendered picture of our bouncing ball. And if you hit the advanced button on your images, you can see that you can kind of make it look like it's a video. Okay, so now with that done, we need to now open up Premiere Pro. And with Premiere Pro open, we're going to go ahead and make a new project. Okay, so I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to save this in a location where I can find it. So I'm going to call this My Bouncing Ball. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and save it in my Maya projects under my bouncing ball folder, and pretty much say OK. And give it a second for Premiere Pro to go ahead and open up. And once it is open, this is where we start. And we're not going to do a whole bunch of things in here. We're just going to do some simple editing so that we can make this into a video. Go up to File, and up here in File we want to go to Import and click on Import. And what will happen is it should open up in your projects. If it doesn't, then you're going to have to go find it, but it should be under your, wherever your projects are, your project name, and then under Images. And under your images, that's where all 200 of those images should be. Now, it's really simple to import them. You just click on the very first one in the series that you want to have it import. If you don't pick number 1 and you pick number 10, it'll skip the first 9, for example. But since we want all 200, I'm going to click on the first one. Click down here where it says Image Sequence. Click that little checkbox, make sure it's checked, and go ahead and say Open. And then down here, you'll see that all of them have opened up, and I have about 6 seconds and a little over 6 seconds worth of time. And if I move along, you can see the ball moves along with it. So now I'm going to click and drag this and drop it over here into the timeline for the project area for my bouncing ball. And up here in the top, you'll see that now I have a 6-second video bouncing across the screen. And we could stop here if that's all we wanted to do, but I want to go ahead and add some sound effects to this as well. And that's pretty simple. What we're going to do is you're going to find a file for your sound that you want to use. And in this case, I have this lovely boing sound that's going to happen when my ball hits the ground. So I'm going to move my timeline forward to the point where it impacts, and I'm going to drag in my file from my file folder onto this line down here just below where my video is. And I'm going to drop it right there. And we're going to see how that works. It's pretty long, so we may have to adjust it a little bit, but let's see how it looks for that first bounce. Probably have it just a little bit too late. Let's go ahead and get that ball back on the ground. I'm going to move it forward just a little bit, maybe too much there. See what that does. Okay. I'm going to cut this one down just a little bit because I don't want it to overlap, but I'm going to have it boing at the first. And then I'm just going to have that little sound effect noise all the way up through the top. And I'm going to end it right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over the end and see how I have that little tool show up, the little red line. I can click and drag that down and make it stop where I want it to stop. So now, if I were to play this, kind of ends abruptly, but that's okay. I wanted to have it end and then do it again right there. I'm going to copy that, right click on it and copy it. Actually, that may not work. Let's see here. No. Let's see here. Is there a duplicate? There is, but it's not highlighted. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag in my boing sound again and just edit it again. I don't want it to be exactly the same anyway, so I guess that's probably a good thing that's not working the way I thought it should. So let me go ahead and just move that up just a little bit. Maybe right there. So maybe edit that down a little bit as well. And then maybe one more time right there. So it hits the ground. Bring it in again, and this time I think maybe I'll just leave it. Somewhere around there. Let's see what this sounds like. All right. Definitely some annoying bounces. But anyway, so it's a cartoon ball. That's okay. And now I've got everything set up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure I save this. And now I'm going to go up here again to File. And this time I'm going to go to Export, Export Media. And I'm going to leave it as a Windows Media file. Well, that way I can play it almost everywhere. And I'm going to leave it at HD 1080p. It's going to save here onto my desktop. That's where I had it set up for a default save. And I'm going to leave all of these other settings alone for now. Down here, I'm going to use the maximum render quality I have set up and pretty much leave everything else alone. I'm going to click on Export, and it's going to take just a little bit of time to go ahead and render it. It should be fairly quick. And it looks like it's done. I'm going to go to my desktop. And now I'm going to go ahead and play this. Excuse me, I can find the right one. Let's see, here we go. And there you have it. We've just made our first animated video. Okay, so that'll do it for this series. We're going to use this animation for other things later on, but at this point we're done with the bouncing ball.